Welcome back. As I said earlier, the Labor Party doesn't have an Indigenous Australian in Parliament in Canberra. They'd dearly love to do that. The man we thought might be the person to break that barrier for the Labor Party was Warren Mundine, but he's now, this month, quit the Labor Party, which is a bit of a blow to the Labor Party. He's now concentrating full-time on running Generation 1, which is a great Indigenous employment initiative. But if the Liberal Party thought they'd be able to snap up Warren Mundine, I've got news for you. He's not going into politics at all. It was a pleasure to catch up with him earlier this week. Warren Mundine, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We'll get to Generation 1 and your work for Indigenous employment in a moment. But firstly, you've had a major health scare, an open heart surgery. You're recovering well?
No, I'm really going really well. I'm about 4 weeks ahead of recovery. One of the things that were very lucky for me, but also a warning to other people out there, was I was pretty fit. I was running every day. I was in a gym 3 days a week, personal trainer and that. But your life history catches up with you. I remember when I was in hospital, my sister was talking about the food we ate when we were growing up, like bread and dripping, and we had fried Johnny cake and all that type of hamburger and chips and gravy. That all gets up to you in the end of the day. So it's not to say you shouldn't eat that stuff. Moderation is great. But even at, I did have a big scare, knocked on death's door, but I think I've cheated it.
Well, that's good news. While you were recovering, while you were going through this process, you also had another major change in your life. As the first Indigenous national president of the ALP, you decided to quit the Labor Party. That must have been a heart-rending decision.
Well, it was in a lot of ways, but at the same time it was a logical decision in regard to my work as CEO of Generation 1. Now, we're an organisation that needs to be working with all sides of politics in this country, whether it be Liberal Party, National Party, Labor Party, the Greens or whatever, because of the type of work we do. We have to be involved with all of them. Having that, and also when you lay in bed in a hospital for a couple of weeks, looking at death, you have a very serious focus on what you want to achieve for the rest of your life. And I realised that I wanted to have that bipartisan approach, looking at how we can affect policy, as well as, I need to move on from this. My future wasn't in there, so that was my decision. It was a very simple decision. And you're right about heartrending. To me, I thought I was going to be buried with my Labor Party membership. So, but at the end of that, it was a very simple decision.
Was there any sense of sour grapes about it? Was this decision taken because you didn't get that Senate vacancy spot that went to Bob Carr earlier this year?
Look, there's no sour grapes at all. I thought, when you look at it from the party position, I thought it was a very logical step for them. They needed a person of the calibre of Bob Carr, and no one can underestimate the ability of the man. His success as Premier of New South Wales, plus his success for many years within the party and across politics. And as you look at his work now as Foreign Minister, he's doing a pretty good job as well. So I thought it was a very logical step for the party, and it was a very sensible one.
Is that it for you now, for politics? Is there any chance that you might not go back into politics, perhaps on the Liberal side?
A lot of people have raised that question over the last few days, and I can categorically say, look, when you're laying in bed and you're looking at death and you're thinking about things, politics is the furthest thing from your mind. I think I'm very much over politics. It's more about results and wanting to do these things. Look, I was, I can't pretend I was not involved in it. I was National President of the Labor Party. I was very much in the mix about the political game, the political machinations that go on. But I'm very much over that now. It's about what I can achieve for Indigenous people in Australia, what I can achieve for Australia. And I'm right across a number of issues at the moment. You've seen my appointment by Campbell Newman to their implementation committee of the uranium and that. My focus is now what's best for Australia and how we can get into the global stage and how we operate from there.
But your resignation is a blow to the Labor Party. You must have got some feedback from people in the party, from senior people in the party. They must be disappointed.
Actual fact, the opposite had happened. All the feedback I've got so far from phone calls and that, of course, it maybe just been my friends ringing me. It's been very positive. They were disappointed, of course. They'd like to see me in there and still working for the party. But they understood. They understood, especially from my health perspective, about my new focus. And they wishing me all for the best. And they had funny calls like, "We still love you, Wazza." Keep talking to us and we're happy to work together. And I'm very much committed to that. Look, I'm very grateful to the Labor Party. The Labor Party took this young Aboriginal bloke out of Dubbo, a councillor sitting on the Dubbo City Council, and took me to the national and global stage. So I'm very grateful for that.
But the Labor Party, even though it likes to think of itself as the natural party for Indigenous Australians, has not managed to get one Indigenous Australian into the federal parliament.
That's true, and that's one of the problems that the party's got to face as it goes into the future. Putting me aside, there are a number of good candidates the Labor Party should be focusing on. Let's face it, we did a survey in 2001 and 2006 when I was president of the party, and about 90% of Aboriginals, 95% even at some stages, vote Labor. Now, and the Labor Party sees itself as the natural party for Indigenous people, for Aboriginal people. They can't keep on saying that if they don't have a person sitting in that parliament. On the other side of politics, we've seen Senator Neville Bonner, and now we're seeing Ken Wyatt, and I predict that they'll probably even look at other people. We've seen the newspapers lately in regard to Alison Anderson, and I predict that.
Yes, and there's Bess Price and Alison Anderson.
There's a number of people coming now through the Liberal Party. The Labor Party really has to lift their game now and start doing these things. And it's not impossible. They've got some great members, Indigenous members of the party, and they've got some great talent to work from.
Have you given up on Labor?
Not on the Labor Party, no. I think there's a lot of room and improvement. There's a lot of people have written obituaries about the Labor Party since 1891, but it seems to go on and can get stronger and better as life goes on. They're getting a bit of a kick around the head at the moment at the state and territory levels in regard to elections and that. To me, it's just a watershed. It'll clean through the system. The Labor Party will reinvent itself, focus on the future, get back to the real issues that it needs to do.
Well, you're focused now on Generation 1, and the intent of Generation 1 is to get practical help to Indigenous Australians, to get them into the practical help of employment. Now, how many jobs have been promised, and how many people have you actually been able to get into employment?
Well, the surprising thing for me is a lot of people said when Andrew Forrest raised the issue of 50,000 jobs that we wouldn't get it. To me, it was always gettable to get that. I knew corporate Australia was out there wanting to do things. I knew that a number of businesses across Australia wanted to do things for Indigenous people. We had a very simple philosophy. The real and only way to change the socio-economic status for Aboriginal people and to bring them into the wider Australian economy and the wider Australian society and globally as well is the simple process of a job. When we went to talk to the corporate world, we talked to CEOs and we talked to chairs of boards and we talked to a number. There wasn't a person we met that wasn't on side. 60,000 jobs, it was a tremendous effort by the Australian Employment Covenant to get those numbers up, and they did a fantastic job within 4 years. We've got 60,000 jobs now, we've got about over 10,000 people into those jobs. The issue for us now is how do we go into the future, getting training, education, so that people are job ready and they can start moving into that.
What have you got to say about opportunity versus self-responsibility? What have you got to say about Indigenous Australians actually getting up and going off and taking those jobs that are on offer rather than perhaps staying back on welfare? Look,
the opportunities have always been there. The problem that we've done, and this is a problem of, and I say we because I was part of the political process as well, is that over the last 30 or 40 years we've marginalised Indigenous people out of the mainstream of employment. We put up CDPs, we put up a number of programs that put them outside the employment, put them outside the economy. So the problem we've had now is we've got to re-educate people to see the opportunities that are there. So my father's generation, my grandfather's generation worked in the agricultural industry and in the construction industries, that they could see the opportunities. The generations from there missed all that. So we've got to now start reteaching them that you can, look, there's a mine down the road, you have every right as everyone else to go to that mine and ask for a job. What we've got to do is now work with education. Education is the big key. If you look at the track record of education across state and territory governments and that, it's pretty dismal. Even in New South Wales, you look at statistics of literacy and numeracy levels, which are dreadful, the way Aboriginal people have been trained. I always argued if you ran the education department like a business, you'd have to say that they'd be bankrupt in the way they've been educating Indigenous people.
To come back to the Labor Party, is that part of your problem with the Labor Party, that it's been too focused on symbolism and grievances and not focused on this practical work of getting Indigenous Australians educated and into employment?
Well, that has been the history. There's not only the Labor Party, there's been a history of all major parties across the country. The real issue is about how we implement and do things. There's been a lot of great vision, today, for instance, we had this is the 40th anniversary of its time. A lot of great vision. It's the first time that Indigenous people have been raised in a political campaign, in that campaign. But the issue is about how we implement and make changes to happen. That's why Generation 1, we've picked one simple area which we believe makes major changes, and that is the simple thing of getting an Aboriginal a job. I remember sitting there with some of the members of the party and said, I found it bizarre that when we talked about winning elections, we always talked about economic management and how we're going to manage the economy for the wider Australian community. But as soon as we talked about Indigenous people, we went into this welfare mode and this protected species mode, almost like sacred koalas. And we started talking about that stuff. It was not helping Indigenous people. This is what's trapped them in the issues that they have today. This is not about black or white issues. You see, some of the problems we have in Aboriginal communities are the same as what's happening in some poor white communities in Australia, ethnic communities and that as well. We've got to put that aside and we've got to focus on what are the real things that make people, drag them out of the socio-economic doldrums they're in and put them into the wider Australian community. That's what we've got to work on.
Warren Mundine, good health and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, he's a big loss to the Labor Party, I think, Warren Mundine, but he's going to be a big contributor about the place anyway through Generation 1 and his other contributions to the public debate.